Watch them just manipulate the formation into exactly what they want. And then Gibbs speed around the edge, seal blocks.
Here's Gibbs, gets the edge, gets the first down.
Nothing but end zone.
And the touchdown.
The most important game of the 2024 NFL regular season will be its last. This one is for the NFC North. This one is for the NFC's number one seed. This one is huge. Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Johnny Gaz. Thank you for returning for another video. The Detroit Lions will battle the Minnesota Vikings in Week 18. This one will be on Sunday Night Football, January 5th, kickoff at 8:20 p.m. from Ford Field on NBC. Let's go through our full game preview. I'll give the headlines and storylines from this week. We'll talk about the key matchups and the X factors. I'll tell you what the difference in the game will be, and at the end of the video, I will give my final prediction and score, so stick around. Let's dive into the biggest season finale in NFL history. Let's go. This will be the first time in NFL history that two teams will square off in the regular season with 14-2 records. These teams last met in Week 7, where the Lions were able to eke out a victory in Minnesota, 31-29, on the basis of a late Jake Bates field goal, as well as a very efficient quarterback performance by Jared Goff. Let's go through the Lions headlines from this week before we get into this huge Week 18 matchup. The Lions' historic season has been fueled by a high-powered offense, which broke two additional records last week. The Lions have the most games with 40-plus points with no turnovers, and they are the first team in NFL history to have a pair of running backs and a pair of wide receivers each have 1,000 yards from scrimmage. They're also the second team in NFL history to have four players with 1,000 scrimmage yards and 7-plus TDs. The only other team to do so are the 04 Colts. The Lions have been teasing on their social media wearing their alternate all-black uniforms for this huge pivotal matchup against the Vikings in Week 18. On the opposite end, the Vikings will be wearing their white-on-white combination, not their wintry color rush uniform, but their just basic white-on-white. Should be a great clash for this last matchup of the regular season. This Thursday, the NFL announced their 2025 Pro Bowl rosters, and the Detroit Lions are well represented. They are only second to the Ravens' 9 players that made the Pro Bowl. The Lions will be represented by 7 different players. They also had 11 different alternates. Quarterback Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Penei Sewell, Frank Ragnow, Brian Branch, and Jack Fox, all named to the Pro Bowl for 2025. Let's go through our injury report, starting with a few players who may be coming off of injury reserve. They have now activated the 21-day window for both wide receiver Khalif Raymond as well as linebacker Alex Anzalone, who were both full practices on Thursday of this week. Khalif Raymond is leaning more towards being ready for the matchup against the Vikings, whereas Alex Anzalone may need an additional week or two before he may be ready. Jack Campbell, the linebacker, as well as Amik Robertson, who were limited in practice on Wednesday, were upgraded to full practice, both of them on Thursday, and both appear to be a go for this matchup against the Vikings. David Montgomery is still listed with no practice and is not expected to return here for this regular season finale. We'll have to monitor his status as we get into the playoffs. Also, guard Christian Mahogany as well as cornerback Emmanuel Mosley both did not practice Wednesday or Thursday of the game week. Both have an unknown illness listed here. Again, we'll have to monitor their status as we get closer to game time. Let's switch it over to the Vikings side and look at the headlines and storylines from this week. Of course, the Vikings entered this matchup also at a surprising 14-2 on the basis of a hot Brian Flores defense. Head coach Kevin O'Connell is getting the most out of quarterback Sam Darnold, and they will do everything they possibly can for this upset in Motown to grab this number one seed. Minnesota, also having a fantastic season, are sending 6 different players to the 2025 NFL Pro Bowl. Of course, quarterback Sam Darnold and his resurgence, wide receiver Justin Jefferson, cornerback Byron Murphy, outside linebacker Jonathan Greenard, as well as Andrew Van Ginkel, and their long snapper Andrew DePaulo making the initial All-Star roster. Running back Aaron Jones, who signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Minnesota Vikings this past offseason, has expressed his gratitude and really wanting to re-sign with the organization after the season is over. He's had potentially his best season at 30 years old, 245 carries, the most of his career. He also needs only 29 yards for his career high in yardage. The Minnesota Vikings are glad to have him and will look to re-sign him in this offseason. With the resurgence of Sam Darnold, the Minnesota Vikings are left wondering what they're going to do at quarterback this offseason. We know that they drafted at number 10 in the draft last year Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who has not taken a regular season NFL snap. Well, with how well Sam Darnold has played this year, it's hard to imagine the Minnesota Vikings won't want to roll forward with Sam Darnold at quarterback. That may mean that they may field calls or take questions on making a move for that number 10 overall pick. In any big matchup like this, sometimes it's the little things that matter the most. Special teams can play such a huge part in these games. Vikings kicker rookie Will Reichard has missed 3 field goals over the last several weeks, 2 alone against Green Bay in that victory in Week 17. He's come out and said that he still has all the confidence in the world in himself. The Vikings certainly have confidence in him. He started this season going 14 for 14 prior to a Week 7 quad injury. We'll have to see what kind of performance we get for him in this high-pressure situation in Detroit. Just a few injury notes for the Vikings. Both edge Patrick Jones with a knee and linebacker Camus Grugler-Hill, I think I'm butchering that name, with an illness, have not practiced this week. Aaron Jones, the running back, right guard Ed Ingram, as well as the cornerback Fabian Moreau were all limited practice participants, but all are expected to play against the Lions. At this point in the season, we know who these teams are. So let's go through the key matchups here for Lions versus Vikings in this Week 18 finale. I think the biggest matchup will be the Lions secondary versus the Vikings offensive weapons. And I'm going to tell it to you just how I see it. The Lions are not able to stop the Vikings offensive weapons. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor, Aaron Jones, TJ Hawkinson, the Lions will not be able to hold them down. We saw against San Francisco and the 49ers, they were able to do anything they wanted against this Lions defense, especially in that first half. It took 2 Kirby Joseph interceptions to flip the ball back to the offense for the Lions to take the lead and ultimately hold on for a victory in San Francisco. The formula is going to have to be relatively the same against a more high-powered offense here in the Minnesota Vikings. Detroit does not get any pressure from their front four. Their defensive line does not generate pressure and sacks, so they're forced to use linebackers, safeties, and cornerbacks to come up and help in that pressure. And a lot of times that puts their linebackers, their cornerbacks on islands, which has caused issues. And that could be at the forefront against these major weapons for the Vikings. Past teams have pinpointed weaknesses in the Lions' linebacker depth and specifically picked on them, and that may be an issue here again with weapons like TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones out of the backfield. Really, anything that works over the middle has been a tough cover for the Lions. The Lions will have to lean on their strong safety core, Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. Both have showed they are able to make plays specifically against this Viking defense. Brian Branch had one of the best games of his season in Week 7 against the Vikings. The second key matchup in Lions versus Vikings here for Week 18, and this is strength on strength, is the Lions offensive line versus the Vikings front seven, this Brian Flores defense, which is extremely blitz heavy. And they come at you from all different angles. They disguise their fronts. They'll show blitz and back off and vice versa. And you'll see a lot of that here against the Lions. They will really try to generate pressure against Jared Goff, get him off his kilter, and hopefully try to force a turnover from the Lions quarterback. The Lions rushing attack has proven to be just as dominant even in the absence of David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs over the past several weeks has been very good, rushing for over 100 yards in each matchup and averaging over 5.6 yards per carry. For the Vikings defense to have ultimate success against the Lions here in Week 18, they will have to try and limit the rushing attack. If they're able to do so, it may decrease the effectiveness of the Lions play-action game, and then everything kind of starts to snowball in the Vikings' favor. The Vikings are also fantastic at forcing turnovers. They are tied for first in the league at forced turnovers here in 2024. Now let's talk about the X factors of the players that will make the ultimate difference in this huge NFC North game here for Week 18. And I think you first got to start with the quarterbacks, and this could be ultimately where this game is made or broken. Jared Goff versus Sam Darnold. Now, I'll start with Jared Goff, who has been Mr. Efficiency and ultimately has put himself in the MVP conversation here for 2024. In Week 7, he went 22 of 25 and had over 280 yards passing with 2 touchdowns. In his last 7 games, he's only thrown 1 interception. Honestly, all season long, outside of the one blip against the Texans, he's been truly fantastic and will be an X factor against the Vikings. On the other side, Sam Darnold has had a resurgence at quarterback with the Vikings and head coach Kevin O'Connell. On the season, he has 4,153 passing yards with 35 TDs. In that Week 7 matchup against the Lions, he was also extremely efficient. He had over an 81% completion rate against the Lions in that game. And as we just talked about in our key matchups, I think the Lions' run game is always key, and that is leaning on Jahmyr Gibbs. They will still be without David Montgomery in this matchup against the Vikings. As I mentioned, Jahmyr Gibbs has gone on over 100 yards on the ground alone in the last 2 matchups, but as we know, he's also a huge threat in the passing game, the screen game. I think you'll see a lot of that here against the Vikings. Let's stick with the Lions offense, and we got to focus on Jameson Williams, who has been Mr. Reliable over the last 5 or 6 games for the Lions. In 5 of his last 6 matchups, he's caught over 5 balls. He's kind of limited the drops that seemed to plague him early on in his career and has become a huge big play threat for this Lions offense. And on the other side, for the Minnesota Vikings, you may have potentially the best wide receiver in all of the NFL. Justin Jefferson, who is just as much a lion killer as Keenan Allen. If you've watched any of my game previews against the Bucs here in this season or previous seasons against the LA Chargers, Justin Jefferson just seems to have the Lions' number. 7 catches for 81 yards in that matchup in Week 7 with a touchdown. On the season, he has 1,474 yards and 10 touchdowns total. Defensively for the Vikings, you have to focus on what they do up front. 2 players who have a combined 22.5 sacks on the season, Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Greenard. The Lions' offensive line is going to have to be on the lookout, not only for those 2 gentlemen, but the entire front 7. They really know how to get after the quarterback. And lastly, for the Lions defense, I got to bring up Kirby Joseph, and we gave him a lot of love for the 2 interception performance against San Francisco last week. But I thought even before that, he was having an all-pro type season. And although he was listed as an alternate for the Pro Bowl, I believe he was snubbed for an ultimate selection here in 2025. He's been really fantastic for the Lions over these past several weeks, even on top of the depleted injuries that they have on defense. They will really need to lean on him and the safety core in this matchup against the Vikings. The difference in the biggest game of this 2024 NFL regular season will be the turnovers. The Minnesota Vikings are tied for first in the NFL in forcing turnovers. On the opposite end, the only chance this Lions defense may have is to force turnovers. The quarterbacks, Jared Goff versus Sam Darnold. Who remains efficient or who makes that one mistake? Motor City Dan Campbell versus Kevin O'Connell. 2 fantastic head coaches who have gotten the most out of their teams in 2024. Who ultimately has enough to lead their team to victory, or who makes that decision that puts their team in a bad spot in this Week 18 matchup? Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions, versus the defensive coordinator Brian Flores for the Minnesota Vikings. What a fantastic matchup to end this season on. Who has the upper hand? Who will come out on top? I think it comes down to who protects the football. To me, the team with the less turnovers in this game will have the leg up and should take the NFC North and the NFC's top seed. The line for this game has fluctuated this week, but as of January 2nd, the line was set at Lions minus 2.5 and the over-under at 56.5 points. This is a fantastic matchup. Something I wouldn't have predicted at the start of the season. I certainly wouldn't have told you that the Minnesota Vikings would be in the position that they're in. But we are where we are as we head into the biggest game of this 2024 NFL regular season. And I have the Lions coming out on top. I think the Ford Field factor is a thing. The Lions being at home for this regular season finale, I believe, gives them a slight edge. I also believe they have the slight edge at quarterback, which could make the ultimate difference in everything we've talked about here in my game preview. I have the Lions winning this Week 18 game, taking the NFC North and the NFC's top seed by the score of 31-27. That would bring the Lions to 15-2 and would drop the Vikings to 14-3. That is going to do it for my Week 18 game preview. What a fantastic matchup this should be. Who do you have? Let me know down in the comments below. Let me know if you have Lions or Vikings. What will the final score be? How important will it be for the Lions to get the #1 seed? Let me know in those comments down below. Thank you guys so much for hanging around for another video. If you can, hit that like button if you dig the vibe here at Johnny Gaz Sports. It's the best free way to help out the channel. I'd also love it if you consider subscribing. We're on the road to 3,000 now, thanks to you guys. And if you hit the notify bell, you won't miss any future videos. I have a membership option available now. That's where I do all my live game play-by-plays. I have a ton of other fun stuff, but there is always free content here for you all the time. More than anything else, take care of yourself and that mental health. That's so important. I want to make sure you guys come back and see me on future videos. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week, a great weekend ahead. And more than anything, let's freaking go, Lions.